ready for this?
Yes.
A long time ago, but somehow very near, in a podcast far away, but somehow near you at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the General Geekery Podcast. The podcast where we geek out about all that we love to geek out about, with no regrets, no remorse, and with all the enthusiasm at our fingertips.
And there was much rejoicing.
Yes,
Yay.
throughout the galaxy. Throughout the galaxy. Indeed. All right, enough of that. As always, this is your favorite rebels are here. This is Donald Kaczynski, your coffee ninja by day, gamer and actor by night. And joining me, as always, the autistic master of the brushstrokes herself, Hannah Kubiak.
Hello.
And I think you guys can pretty much judge what we're going to be talking about today just from the music that was playing in the background and during that intro.
Ramen varieties.
Your obsession with ramen always just astounds me sometimes.
It just is the thing that pops into my brain when I'm trying to think of something random and unrelated to anything.
Fair enough. There could be worse topics to have pop into your head than ramen, so it's fair.
Yep.
Today is a discussion about Star Wars. More specifically, we wanted to talk today about the impact of the original Star Wars trilogy, episode 4 through 6. And just how much of an impact it had on its own universe, as well as basically the entire world as we know it at large.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've been wanting to talk about Star Wars in general a lot. Like, I think even before we did the episode when we were talking about The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We both have fond memories of the Star Wars franchise. So, obviously, the original trilogy, Episode 4, A New Hope, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts, especially Episodes 4 and 5 in particular. So, before we get started on, like, just all of the Star Wars in general, Hannah, I think we probably asked this question ourselves when we were first introduced to Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just bears reiterating.
Sure.
Around what age did you first watch any of the Star Wars films?
Well, it was so young that I don't actually remember a time that I had never seen Star Wars. So,
okay, that's
since before my brain could create memories, I think I've been watching Star Wars, because I don't remember the moment that I don't remember the moment that I first watched Empire Strikes Back, for instance, and learned the truth about Luke and Vader.
Oh, yeah.
I just always knew that. So I didn't have that, what moment? It was just a thing that I knew.
If we can go back in time with video cameras and see little Hannah and little Donald watching Empire Strikes Back for the first time and learning that truth and just seeing their reactions.
My gosh.
Just,
oh my gosh.
Just like how parents do with their children all the time on the internet.
These days, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah. It's almost kind of the same for me. I think I was around 4 or 5 when I first started watching them.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to remember because a lot of my memories are kind of clumped together from those days. So
yeah.
But yeah, obviously Star Wars is a franchise that really needs no introduction or really big explanation. It's one of the biggest money makers in cinema. Is one of the most beloved sci-fi titles in fiction. And outside of the original trilogy, has spawned an entire universe's worth of content through written literature, comic books, video games, television series, everything. Like anything you can think of to merchandise, Star Wars probably merchandised it.
Yep. I think one of my favorite Star Wars merch examples is the fact that for a while they had pictures of Rey on bags of lettuce.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And I think there was a comment that she made where she basically just like, what? So weird. Why? I mean, they may as well, but it doesn't make any sense.
Oh my god. I completely forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
Ay, caramba. But yeah, this Star Wars exploded. It's because I can only think of like a few other things like it that kind of top it in just terms of like impact. The only other thing that I think comes to mind is obviously it's polar opposite, Star Trek.
Oh right, yeah.
Because obviously like you can't talk about Star Wars without like somebody talking about Star Trek as well, and honestly the Trekkie factor, as it were, deserves its own separate episode.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
Indeed it would. So yeah. But without further ado, let's dive in. We're going in and talking about the entire original trilogy of Star Wars. Cover me, Porkins! I love that line.
Cover me, Porkins.
I remember hearing that line in Star Wars Family Guy, like back before I could really quote Star Wars as much, and I'm like, that can't be in the original film, and I found it in the original film. I'm like, oh my god.
Remind me where that's from again.
It's from episode 4 A New Hope. It's when they're doing the trench run on the Death Star.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, there's that. So
wait, which one is Porkins?
He's one of the X-Wing fighters. He's like a big side character. Like, the crazy thing about like most Star Wars characters is like their side characters will be in the will have the screen time amount of movie for like maybe 30 seconds to a minute, but they'll still be so freaking memorable. That's like the crazy thing. And honestly, like, so okay, the original Star Wars premiered in 1976, I want to say.
Oh, 77.
77? Okay, thank you for correcting me on that.
You're welcome.
And obviously made a huge impact on audiences worldwide. There was nothing like it in cinema at the time. And it was something a lot of people said could never be replicated. Then episode 5 came out.
Yeah.
Confusing a lot of people because when the original Star Wars came out, it was just Star Wars. It wasn't episode 4 A New Hope. That was added in on later releases.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. There are I'll explain that in just a second. But then episode 5 came out, and George Lucas was explaining like he was telling this in like a weird sort of order, which wouldn't honestly come to fruition until the prequel trilogy which started in 99 with Phantom Menace.
Yeah. That's so weird. Yeah, imagine that actually. You're sort of you watch the first one, and then the next year something comes out that's titled episode 5, and you think, what happened? It's like the thing with the pigs where you let loose a bunch of pigs numbered 1 through 4. There's only 3 of them, and they spend ages looking for the 3rd pig.
Yeah. What in the world?
Classic.
That's what we call a funny. But
yeah.
But yeah, like, and the crazy thing is, like, both episode 4 and episode 5 are considered some of the greatest films ever made. A lot of people lean more towards episode 5 as being not only being one of the best films ever made, but the best sequel ever produced for any kind of film.
Yeah.
which is insane.
Yeah.
Because you go back to our episode when we were talking about movie remakes, and we were talking about like some sequels being remakes and everything like that, just not living up to the original. Some people kind of interpreted that when episode 5 was originally released, and I'm taking this from eyewitness accounts from like family from who were teenagers in that generation, and they grew up watching Star Wars in cinema.
Yeah.
So I actually had to ask them about this when I originally came up with this topic.
Oh, okay. What did they say?
They thought that the new Star Wars film, they thought it was just going to be a rehash of episode 4.
Oh.
Which didn't actually happen. Episode 6 took a little bit more of that route, to be honest, but
yeah.
but that's a different thing entirely. So obviously, like the original trilogy created so many characters that has lived on in like mainstream media, that is basically some beloved characters in fiction. Obviously, Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia make Space Mom proud. Make Space Mom proud. Han Solo, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, everything like that. And the crazy thing is, like, I think Star Wars was really one of the first, like, major films that made side characters as equally memorable, if not more memorable sometimes, than the main cast.
Yeah.
At times. Like...
Oh, for sure.
I think the biggest example of that was the Boba Fett craze.
Oh, yeah.
Like how some people were just like, oh my god, Boba Fett! when in all actuality, he didn't even really have as much screen time as others, and only had a couple lines of dialogue that was only limited to The Empire Strikes Back.
Right, yeah.
But as the Star Wars universe expanded through multiple different writers and visionaries and everything like that, like, it turned out that Boba Fett was like an introductory character to the Mandalorian race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah. Like, the amount of stuff that branched off from that singular trilogy into its prequel and sequel films, to all of its tie-in stories through video games and other forms of literature, is kind of nuts. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, outside of like the original trilogy, have you seen anything outside of the original trilogy, like in terms of like books and everything like that from Star Wars that has interested you at all, Hannah?
Oh goodness.
It doesn't even have to be like books or anything like that. It could be anything like Star Wars related.
I don't think so. Oh, there is this game that my family and I got really into the past couple of years called Star Wars Destiny. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh yeah, that's right. You talked about that you actually talked about that a couple of times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's so much fun. It's kind of like a living card game, and you build a team using different characters, and then you face off with somebody else and seek to destroy them. It's fun.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like fascinating with that because you played as like characters from the universe itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they've got characters from the original series, from the sequels, from the prequels. My mom and I like to sort of create not so much decks that are optimized, but ones that would be fun. Like we have this idea of doing something that would be like Emperor Palpatine versus Mace Windu, and then we have like Anakin, and each round we roll to see which side he's gonna fight on.
Oh man!
Like that thing from the Revenge of the Sith.
Oh yeah.
where they face off.
You on the lava planet on Mustafar?
No. Mace Windu and
Oh,
the Emperor.
blah,
You know, where the
blah.
window gets blown out and the Emperor zaps himself in the face.
No, no, you will die. I laugh at that scene every time.
Oh man.
Just the way that Ian McDermott just like the way he just like delivers that line is just, oh my god, he's having the time of his life with this.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So much fun. Oh man. I looked up a lot of stuff about about A New Hope actually, and just um kind of like themes and stuff, I guess.
Yeah,
Um like if you want to hear more about this, like I just am going to say a little bit, but if you want to hear more about this from somebody who knows a lot better than I do about this kind of stuff, like myths and archetypes and stuff like that, we actually discussed Star Wars and how it connects to mythology in episodes 6 and 7 of the Splankniks podcast. So,
oh yeah,
yeah,
definitely go check
yeah.
that out. That was a really good. Those were really good. Those were really good.
Yeah. We mostly talked about like the hero's journey and sort of how that following it through A New Hope and what makes that story just so awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that because it started off with New Hope that Star Wars basically became like modern mythology.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So something that I thought was really cool um about this whole universe is that it kind of the the force is kind of like this. Yes, it surrounds us, it penetrates us. It's everywhere, and it's kind of like this vague spiritual kind of thing based on very peaceful principles. You know, like they have their weaponry, but their main goal is to preserve peace. And there's this there's this interview with Lucas in Time magazine where he said, this is kind of a paraphrase, but he wanted to use these stories to sort of distill religious issues to be more accessible to modern people, and to awaken spirituality in young people, and for young people to question the mystery of the world, which I think is really cool. Like, he based a lot of his his themes and stuff on, he was influenced by Buddhism and Christianity primarily, and so you can see a lot of that kind of a lot of that influence
Through the Jedi religion.
mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, through the Jedi religion. There is a strong theme of redemption in this, which is pretty cool. I usually a story of redemption is focused on the well, I mean, I guess it kind of is. The main redemption story that we have is Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader and like falling into the dark side, you know. And I think
it's probably like one of the longest journeys of redemption that has been like revisited and retold, like through, because it has its obvious beginning and end, but in between that time frame is a lot of spin-off media, including books and of course the original trilogy films and several TV shows.
Yeah. So, yeah, this whole idea of they're warriors, the Jedi, but primarily their goal is peace, and like goodness and like just non-violence,
They swear themselves to keep the peace throughout the galaxy. They are
yeah, to keep the peace.
the teachings of the Jedi to basically detach oneself from attachment and bonds to materialistic, except for the Jedi's lightsaber, which represents their life and their duty.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's sort of I was always really, I don't know who told me this, who pointed it out. I think it was probably my mom. Um, she's the one who introduced me to Star Wars and got me really into it and everything. But I think I may have mentioned this in another episode, but the progression of like Luke's journey throughout the 3 movies is sort of reflected in the way that they decided to costume him for each movie, because
you did mention that.
Yeah, so he starts out as this he starts out as this kid who has a lot of ideals about how things should be, and
who wants to go off to fight to join the rebellion.
He wants to fight. He wants to join the rebellion. That's right. And as the story goes on, he starts to sort of see where his purpose lies, and that's with saving his father.
Yep. Ultimately,
by the end of it, ultimately,
that is the decision he makes. That it the way of the Jedi that was taught to him. That's how it ended up.
Yeah, and just the sort of the progression there of like, in order to save somebody who's so far gone, you have to go into the darkness yourself. Like, I think I just had a brain blast. I think maybe that's when Luke is on what's the name of the planet where Yoda lives?
Dagobah.
Dagobah system.
You must journey to the Dagobah system. There you.
Okay, yeah. So when he's on Dagobah and he's doing his Jedi training and everything, and he goes into this cave and a really weird, like, dream sequence kind of thing. He goes into the cave and he meets his darkness, basically, and that's Darth Vader. He like battles him in the cave and everything. And I think that's kind of like a prophecy about what he has to do, how he has to go into the heart of the darkness and basically bring what remains of his father out of the darkness and back into the light. And I think maybe that's like, there's a weird thing where they're fighting and he cuts off Darth Vader's head, and then under the mask it's his own face.
Yep.
It's kind of like, what?
Like
so psychedelic when you think about it.
Yeah, I know. Like on the surface level, like, because of like the twist that happens earlier, like it's like it foreshadows the connection between Luke and Vader, but on the spiritualistic side, it's basically what you just explained there.
Like, you have to find the good in like he has to find the good in Darth Vader. Like, there's still good in you. I can sense it, And he's supposed to find the good in Darth Vader, and in the cave, I think the Force was trying to tell him basically that you are the good that remains of your father. Like, you're his like his weakness or whatever. Like, you're the one who's going to turn him.
Right. And honestly, like, I think that's like that actually relates to like almost a common misconception that I think that a lot of people have just about the Force in general in the world of Star Wars. Because how I always viewed it, the ones that are able to use the Force, whether they be Jedi or Sith, they're not controlling the Force, they're simply channeling it.
Mm-hmm.
They are not the controllers, they are simply the conduits that channel the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like, there's a higher calling as to like what the Force is. Like,
Yeah.
even Yoda, the most powerful Force user, like, that is presented in Star Wars, even states that the Force is channeled.
Mm-hmm.
In his own Yoda-like speak.
Channels the Forces.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the exact line, but
He said it sometime. He said it at sometimes through like all the different forms of media. I swear, at some point, that's how it always came across to me, because because you see all these different oddities at point, like the cave on Dagobah that Yoda has said, "Strong that place is with the dark side of the Force," but and some people are always like, well, why can't they use like turn that place good? I'm like, but in my mind, I'm like, the Jedi and everyone has said, like, the Force surrounds us, penetrates us. It's the binding of all life. It's something that can be channeled, but it's not something that you can control. You can influence it, but there is light and there is dark. There has to be balance.
yeah.
Because a common thing that's always prevalent throughout the entirety of Star Wars, at least through the Skywalker stories, is balance being brought to the Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, not necessarily just destroying what's bad, or destroying like the darker part of it, like it's balance instead.
And that is ultimately what causes like the downfall of the Jedi in the Clone Wars. Because we only get like mentions of like what happened like during the time of young Obi-Wan and Anakin in bits and pieces in the original trilogy, and we didn't really get like a full fleshed out thing until like the prequel trilogy, as well as like the Clone Wars television series. But like when they talk about it in the original trilogy, and you get these images in your mind, if you haven't seen like the prequel stuff first, and you get these imaginations in your mind and picture how it all went. Like, that's how I always like to do it. That's why I always recommend to some people like who have never seen Star Wars before, and they're like how should I watch it? And I'm like, you need to watch episodes 4 through 6 first.
This is the way.
This is the way, indeed. I love that we basically accepted that into the mythos without any sort of fuss or anything like that. Bless you, bless you, Mandalorian. Season 2. Season 2, we cannot wait for thee. We cannot wait. We cannot wait.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to it. So much.
But yeah. It's kind of insane, like the impact it has. Because I've seen some people who there are two different sides. People that have seen Star Wars from Episode 1 onward, and some of them say they can't really sit through the original trilogy as much because of like effects and everything like that. And I'm like, that is a horrible way to describe that.
Yeah.
Because I know George Lucas has like gone on record and said like he wished he had waited like a couple more years for Star Wars in order to like get some more of the effects down with like the computer technology and everything like that, because you see it because you see it constantly with like the re-releases of like the original trilogy, and when they add little things here and there, whether it be like digital reshoots of like certain creatures and everything like that, and I'm like, I feel like those are unneeded.
Yeah.
but then you also get like small little 10-second snippets that were added back in during reshoots in order to add like drama and tension, like the snow creature on Hoth, the execution of the Twi'lek woman in Jabba's palace by death of Rancor. It's just some of it's unneeded, others add to it. I'm like, okay, all right, I understand, but
Yeah.
But it's like for some people, I'm like the reason why I say you watch the original trilogy, episodes 4 through 6 is most important is because I think it's the trilogy that eases you into the universe that Star Wars presents. It's the most easily accessible, I think, out of all of the Star Wars media out there.
Yeah.
So that's my take.
Yeah.
I know a couple of people that might disagree with me, but that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Hey, have you ever, I've probably introduced you to this because I do it to everybody. Have you ever played this game where you take lines from Star Wars and you put the word pants in?
Yes. There are many different versions of that game.
I love it.
Yes, it's like
I find your lack of pants disturbing.
that
one never fails me.
Oh, it's so good. So good.
With my pants down, I can't even see. How am I supposed to fight? Your pants can deceive you. Don't trust them.
Ay, caramba. Every single time.
Jabba has no time for smugglers who drop their pants at the first sign of an Imperial freighter.
Okay, that's the best one. 10 out of 10. 10
Something just touched my pants. That's your imagination.
Oh my god.
I could do this all day.
And the crazy thing is, like, I think like the original trilogy is probably some of the most quotable movies of I think of all time. There are so many memorable quotes from that movie trilogy that it's crazy. There is almost, I think the only other film series that I think that has just as many quotable lines from their movies as Star Wars is probably maybe Mad Max.
Oh, yeah.
And that's stretching it. Well, actually, maybe the Godfather series, but that's a different thing entirely.
I just thought of another one.
Oh, God. Okay, go ahead. Do it.
From the sequel.
She can't stop laughing.
What do you think you would see if I removed my pants? The face of my son.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, I'm so juvenile sometimes, I swear.
We're all just a bunch of kids at heart.
Oh, yeah.
That is just the mere truth of the world.
Yeah. So, I think that something that these movies do for us is they show us sort of the way to go from violence to peace. That's kind of one of Luke's journeys. There's this article that I was frantically reading before this recording from theconversation.com in its religion and mythology series. Pretty cool.
Okay.
And it goes like this. Luke himself undergoes a conversion away from the violent, swashbuckling hero to the monk-like Jedi Knight who gives up on violence and anger. At the climactic end of the Return of the Jedi, Luke refuses his chance to kill Vader and indeed tries to save him, aware that by using violence he risks becoming a half-human enslaved to a false master who promises liberation through anger and hate. Redemptive violence and heroism are set aside for a spiritual path of non-violent love, heavily influenced in Lucas's thought by Buddhism and Christianity. Crucially, the story here turns from Luke becoming a violent victor to a loving victim who is willing to give his life rather than take another's life. In suffering and confronting evil with love, evil can be transformed, resisted, and overcome.
Yeah. I
thought that was very well put.
That's very well. Yeah, indeed. You could actually, the journey to that, you can actually just see in the early parts of Episode 6 during the entire thing with Jabba's palace, how many times Luke gave Jabba so many opportunities to just end this peacefully. He did not. He said, I implore you, like, we can end this peacefully. Please do not let me do this.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell he's slowly adapting to the monk-like ways of the Jedi, because, like, the Jedi they are peacekeepers. They have to maintain the peace. They fight when needed, but they do not fight for glory. They do not fight for power. They do not fight to seek any kind of, like, reward or anything like that. They need to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Of course, these views and everything are challenged during the time of the Clone Wars, as the course of the war basically corrupted, like, the principles of the Jedi in many ways, as we saw through the Clone Wars TV series.
Yeah.
But yeah, that basically, yeah, that I have to agree wholeheartedly with that statement. That is absolutely Luke's journey throughout the entire original trilogy.
Yeah.
And I think that's just why we just relate to it so, like, I think we related to, like, the original trilogy so much just because of, like, for us as people, like, we tend to, like, I honestly believe we just tend to, like, attach ourselves more to characters in fantasy settings more so than, like, real world, like, situations at times.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just, like, it's just our imagination subconsciously trying to link 1 and 2 together, or if it's just, like, a yearning for another reality or fantasy, but
yeah,
humans always have that fascination. And it's a wonder to behold.
Yeah.
It's a definite wonder to behold.
Pants! Unlimited pants!
Never gonna let that go, are you?
No, it's so much fun.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like, a lot of, like, the original trilogy means so much to a lot of people, but I think for, like, just the in-universe thing itself, the original trilogy is basically like the starting point which branches off the entire universe of Star Wars. If the entire universe of Star Wars is this giant tree, then the original trilogy would have to be the seed that grew into this tree.
Yeah.
Because a couple of things that I can name off the top of my head that branched off into its own thing from the original trilogy. The prequel trilogy and the entirety of the events of the Clone Wars. This one is kind of a weird fact, but the fact that there's actually no calendar system officiated in the Star Wars universe. So, that's the weird thing. So whenever people are going by year in the Star Wars universe, they always go with the term BBY, or before the Battle of Yavin, which is the battle when they blew up the Death Star in A New Hope.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, kind of a fun thing. Right there.
Interesting.
They always do that as like a branching off point, and then of course you've got the Rebel Army and its part of its formation discovered a little bit more in spin-off titles like the Star Wars Rebels TV series, or even all of its side comics.
Yeah.
It's
Oh man. So much.
so much of it. A lot of it. It's good, and even depending on like how you feel about like some of the movies at times, like everybody has their own opinions. I'm not going to show off my opinions because that's not what this podcast is about.
Yeah, no.
It
is about your opinions.
Well, kind of. But I always like to keep this podcast like just about the good we can get out of everything.
That's a good idea.
So
I like that.
So even though like you can't really agree with a lot of the stuff found in like some of the Star Wars films, there's always something good to take out of it.
Yep.
I remember a time when a lot of people just could not stand the prequels. They couldn't stand them, but I always found some good stuff to be taken out of the prequels. Like in episode 3 during a quiet scene in the opera house, we get more of like the Star Wars mythos in terms of like the foundation of the Sith in the form of Darth Plagueis the Wise. In episode 1, Phantom Menace, we get the first introduction on cinema screen of the Jedi Council and the Jedi Order and how all of that worked. Of course, you get the Clone Wars that was mentioned throughout the original trilogy at certain points, especially in episode 4.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, and then, of course, you got the sequel trilogy that came out, which is more of has become a streamlined version of, like, how that followed up. But at the same time, you also have so many other publications and stuff that was released like after the original trilogy and years before the sequel trilogy was produced by Lucasfilm and Disney, where they actually took their own spin on the post Star Wars trilogy timeline.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, there's so much innovation and creativity that was spawned from the original 3 films.
Yeah.
It's at times it can be a little overwhelming, but during that overwhelming, you just got to sit back and you just think to yourself, these 3 films spawned all of this. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just this one idea from a filmmaker like George Lucas spawned creativity in all forms and influenced the minds of so many different writers, actors, directors, many of whom who were fans of like the entire series are now working on projects for the series. The Mandalorian is like a perfect example of that. Jon Favreau, who was one of the guys that heads The Mandalorian, has worked on several different Star Wars properties before that, and you can tell he cares deeply about the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can think of like another extensive universe that has had so many different like people working on it in so many different platforms that care so much about it and expanded the universe outside of comic books.
Yeah.
Outside of like Marvel and DC with their like different universe stuff spanning television shows and everything like that. Those are the only like comparisons I can draw Star Wars to. It's really that all-encompassing.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. Well, yeah, as I said, I've been familiar with these movies since before I had memories. So
So,
it's pretty cool.
actually, with that said, is there a favorite movie out of the original trilogy that you prefer to go to more than others?
Oh man. I mean, I am I I I am partial to A New Hope just because it was the origin and everything. I love it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It also has one of my favorite Star Wars villains in the way of Grand Moff Tarkin. Bless you, Peter
Hmm.
Cushing. Bless you.
Hmm.
Oh
Ah,
man.
General Tarkin. General Tarkin. I recognized your foul pants as soon as I was brought on board.
She's not gonna let this go, folks. She's not.
No.
She's never gonna let this go.
No.
Oh, and as
You may pants when ready.
the fact that she did it in the Grand Moff Tarkin voice too. That, oh my god, she had the tone perfect.
Oh yeah. All right. I am satisfied with this discussion.
she got her pants quotas for the day.
I got my pants quote in.
And and yeah, that's pretty much all we can talk about. Like, my god.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can say about like Star Wars that hasn't even been said. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason why so many people go back and just watch these original films so much, is because they mean so much to a lot of people. If without the foundation of the original 3 films, New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi,
Yeah.
and like, I don't know how Star Wars could have expanded beyond that, or even if it would have expanded beyond that.
Yeah.
Like, everything Star Wars related today, whether it be the sequel and prequel trilogies, the multitude of comic books and spin-off literature and audio books and like fan-made like campaigns through tabletop D&D like adventures, to television series and failed Christmas specials. I know you still haven't lived down Life Day, George Lucas. I know you still have not lived that down. But
Oh my goodness.
there's so much. And honestly, even depending on like how we feel about like some of the recent Star Wars stuff that's been released in recent years, like, our love for this franchise is always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whether you love certain things or whether you don't like other things, everybody can find something to love about this universe.
Mm.
Whether it be just the characters, the action, the mythology, the ideals, the like all of the technology and innovation and ideas, the multitude of worlds, the world building. It all started with 3 films and 1 vision. And that is to be commended. I'm out of breath. I'm exhausted. Yeah, I can't really add anything else onto that.
Yeah. Shall we sign off?
Let's do it. Thank you guys so
Okay.
much again for listening to this episode of the General Geekery Podcast, where we were geeking out all about Star Wars. My goodness, so much. Loved every single moment of it. If you guys liked what you were listening to today, make sure to follow us wherever we can be found, where podcasts can be found. We are on Spotify. We are on Spreaker. We are on Stitcher Radio. For those of you that don't have access to any of those or any other podcast listening platforms, you can check us out on YouTube at Anime Rev Productions, our home for the General Geekery podcast on YouTube. On social media, you guys can check us out at General Geekery on Instagram and at Gen Geek Podcast on Facebook and on Twitter. Hannah, where can they check you out at?
Well, you can find me rolling dice with my party every Monday at 7:30 Central Time at twitch.tv/Loaded Dice Adventures. And you can follow me on Instagram at Pythian Legume. And if you would like to listen to another podcast, I'm also on the Splankniks podcast, where me and my mom discuss all sorts of nerdy things through the lens of two different generations.
Definitely awesome. Go check them out. And as for me, you guys can check me out on social media on Twitter and Instagram at RyuzakiMK7. You can also check me out on twitch.tv most weeknights, or just most nights in general, at twitch.tv/RyuzakiMK7, where I play a multitude of games and mostly RPGs, where I do like a lot of different voices for voice acting just because it's fun. So yeah, you guys can check me out there. So this has been episode 32 of the General Geekery podcast. For Hannah Kubiak, I'm Donald Kaczynski. And until next time, guys, always remember to keep your geek on. But I think for this episode, most importantly, may the Force be with you.
Always.
Clink, clink. Farewell.
It was a flower pot that time.
Later, guys.
Bye.